Alright, so now we look at our triangles that are not right triangles. At least we don't know, for the most part, if they're right triangles or not. So we cannot do SOHCAHTOA, cannot do Pythagorean theorem. So that's out the window. So the biggest thing that we're looking for is corresponding, let me write this down, side and angle. That's the biggest thing that we look for in order to do law of sines. So we don't really care if it's a side-side angle, a side-side-side. We don't really need to memorize that stuff, but we need to know, does it have a corresponding side and angle? If so, we can proceed with law of sines. So let me get back into focus. There we go. So if I look at my first triangle, little c and big C, those we do not have a matching pair. 60 degrees in B, I do not have the corresponding side there. 40 degrees in 4, this would be considered my corresponding side and angle. We've got the angle and the side that's directly across from it. So we're going to set up my proportion. So sine of 40 degrees over 4 is going to be equal to sine of any of my other two angles over its side. So since I already know 60 degrees, I'm going to go ahead and set up sine of 60 over B. From here, we just have a set of fractions equal to each other. So in order to solve it, you cross multiply and divide. So we're going to type in 4 sine of 60 divided by sine of 40. That's going to give me B. Now when you do that, make sure your calculator already puts a parenthesis. Make sure that you close it after the 60. So we do 4 sine of 60 divided by sine of 40. It tells me that B is 5.39. So then at first glance, it's like, all right, well, I don't have an angle or a side with my C's, but I have two of the three, so 60 plus 40 gives me 100. Tells me that C is actually 80 degrees. Now I can go through and I can set up another proportion. So I could add it on. I'm just going to actually put it to the other side. Sine of 40 and 4 is my one that I'm going to use every time. Now I'm looking at sine of 80 over C, so we'll cross multiply and divide. So 4 sine of 80 divided by sine of 40 tells me that C is 6.13, and I have just solved that triangle. So it is not any harder than SOHCAHTOA. But you just have to remember that you cannot do SOHCAHTOA if it's not a right triangle. Here, I don't know if it is or not. It could be a right triangle, but I don't know C or B, so we're going to proceed acting like it is an oblique triangle and non-right. So my corresponding side and angle right here, the 40 and 3. So I'll set up my proportion. Sine of 40 over 3 is equal to, it doesn't really matter where we go from here, except I can't use my C's because I don't know either of those two. So that tells me I have to use B, but this time I'm missing my angle. This is when you have to be careful. There's one extra step. Anytime you're missing an angle, whether it's a right triangle or not, you're going to be doing inverse. So I know in my head, okay, I'm missing an angle. In the end, I'm going to have to take the inverse. Same process, cross multiply. So 2 sine of 40 divided by 3. This time that's equal to sine of B. So I don't have B by itself technically yet. So when I type that in, I get 0.429 equals sine of B. Well, if I'm trying to get B by itself, I would divide by sine, which puts sine in my denominator, which remember, that's like a negative exponent. So I just need to do inverse sine of 0.429. That will give me my angle. When I type that in, once again, we're in degree mode. I get B to be 25.4 degrees. Now I could find angle C, which I have to find before I find side C. So we'll do 180 minus 40 minus 25.4. I know angle C is 114.6 degrees. Then I can go back and I can do a proportion. You can set up a different one. If you would like to rewrite it so that you don't have this in the middle, that's fine. I'm just going to use what I have to find C. So cross multiply. 3 sine of 114.6 divided by sine of 40, and that's going to give me 4.24, and that is my final answer because I'm looking for a side, not an angle. So anytime you're missing a side, you have to remember to cross multiply and divide. That's my final answer. Anytime you're missing an angle, then you have to remember you got an extra step to take the inverse sine. It's always inverse sine if you're using law of sines.